Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ron, and today we're going to be doing another tier list. This is going to be on Deep Rock Galactic Enemies. So we're going to be ranking them from S to D, S being the most dangerous creatures, in my opinion, and D being the least dangerous creatures, again in my opinion. We will not be talking about the passive creatures, the neutral creatures that just don't attack you, or sometimes can't even damage you even if you attack them. I will save those for another list that I plan on doing, which is my favorite bugs in this game, because this game has a lot of really cool bugs, and I would like to take the time to appreciate some of the more kind ones that aren't trying to violently kill you. So let's begin this list with our first entry here, which is the Zarnoj Charge Sucker. I'm not sure if I'm saying that name right. It's the attachments to the spider tank, and the spider tank is called a Betsy, BET/C. Now the suckers themselves pose absolutely no threat to you. However, them being attached to the tank does pose a very big threat to you. There is a lot of damage that the spider tank can do, especially on the higher difficulties. It's equipped with a machine gun that can shoot you. Luckily, it shows you who it's targeting, so you can run and hide or put up a shield if you're a gunner or something like that. Zipline away if you're, or I guess grapple hook away if you're scout. Drill into a hole if you're driller. Something to get out of the way when it's targeting you, because it can just completely shred you. It also has its phase where it puts up a shield and then it's invulnerable and then starts spitting out mines, which then go off and can deal tons of damage to you. Sometimes you're in rooms where you just can't get away from them, which is really bad. These things aren't too bad to fight in a kind of uneven large map. So if there's a lot of vertical space, you can usually get behind stuff, get behind cover, shoot it in its weak spot. Certain weapons do really well against it, like the Scout's Battle Rifle or the Driller's throwing axes. If you can hit the weak spots, it's usually not too bad to take these. And afterwards, you do get a spider tank, which is pretty awesome to run around and kill all sorts of stuff for you. Fighting the spider tank, though, can be kind of painful. I would probably put this one actually up into S tier as in terms of difficulty. They can kill you pretty easily, especially if you're not paying attention and somebody else aggroes it and decides to run it over to the team. That can be pretty bad. All right, up next we have the Parasites, also known as carnivorous larvae. These can only show up on the Parasite warning maps, so you'll only get this if you actually have Parasite warning. These pop out of enemies once they die. You'll get one of them that pops out of any standard enemy like Grunts, and then you'll get up to 3 that pop out of things like Praetorians. Now, the Parasites can't move particularly fast. They move fairly slow. They do kind of flail around, so it can be a little bit difficult to hit them at a distance with precision weapons, but like AoE weapons kill them extremely easy, things like the autocannon, the flamethrower. The Parasites only have a base health of 10, so you can kill them very easily just with anything. Having Thorns as a passive perk works really well against them. Again, weapons like the flamethrower and autocannon work really well against them. You can just smack them with your pickaxe. They're really not much of a threat, but they're always going to consume your ammo, which is kind of annoying. They are much more of a nuisance than they really are a threat. Sure, if you get stuck in a hole with a ton of them, they'll probably kill you, but that usually doesn't happen. At least I don't know if I've died from Parasites directly. I've probably died from Parasites gradually dealing damage over time and whittling my health down, but I don't think I've ever just died outright from them. So I think I'm going to put Parasites in D tier. All right, up next we've got Cave Leeches. These ones can always be a problem. Cave Leeches are completely stationary, and if you see them ahead of time, or if you're running heightened senses, they're not that big of a threat. Unfortunately, sometimes these do hide around corners, and they do actually have a pretty decent range of motion. They can grab you from places that you wouldn't expect them to be able to grab you from. And if you're not paying attention, if you don't have heightened senses, you can get grabbed and completely immobilized by them. They can down you pretty fast once they have a hold of you. And like I said, they're a general nuisance all the time, especially with cave leech infestation where there's more of them. At least then most people are going to be running heightened senses. At least 1 or 2 people will in the group, just because they know it's going to be a cave leech infestation. Outside of that, you sometimes get these every once in a while. You get, 2 to 3 of them on a map sometimes. It kind of depends, because I have had matches where my whole team has nearly died just from a cave leech because nobody called it out or anything, and somebody wandered off, and then somebody else wandered off. And, the third person that wandered to go and find those people ended up having heightened senses and managed to kill the leech then. Can also be pretty bad if there's multiple leeches in an area, but just one leech isn't that bad. Pretty much any weapon, besides maybe like the flamethrower and the cryo cannon, can kill them pretty easily. That's just because of the vertical space. So I don't know really where to put the leech. It's very situational, because if you are the last dwarf alive and you're trying to run away, get away from a crowd or something, this can end you super fast, and then it would be definitely like S tier. But most of the time, they're not too bad. I'm thinking like A or B tier. I guess I'll put the cave leech in B tier, because like I said, if you can see them ahead of time, if you're aware that there is going to be leeches in the board and you have heightened senses. All right, up next we have the wasp nests. These can only be found on the Hollow Bog map, so you only find them there. These do have quite a bit of health as just a structure. They send out little wasps that will come and sting you, which are kind of annoying. They do a decent amount of damage over time if you let them. Weapons like the flamethrower can absolutely destroy them. I believe the autocannon can too. I'm pretty sure any fire weapon can kill them pretty quickly, like the fire or the white phosphorus buckshot shells with the Scout's double barrel. So they're not that big of a threat. If you destroy the structure, the bugs will leave you alone too. So at worst, these are going to be pretty much bullet sponges and annoyances if things go bad and you try to run away, and then you end up running into a couple of these, which, I mean, it's still an annoyance, but they're not like a huge threat, I would say. I don't know. I think I'd put the wasp nest somewhere into high D tier. Up next, we have the honeycomb, which also sends out a swarm of bugs to get you. Again, more of an annoyance. Similar to the wasp nest, they're pretty much the same, except for the honeycombs are way more weak to fire. They take way more damage from fire. So if you have any sort of weapon that inflicts fire, whether that be the flamethrower, an incendiary grenade, the white phosphorus shot with the buckshot, the fire rounds for the grenade launcher, any of those can kill these very quickly. And I would say that they're less of a threat than the wasp nest just because of that. They do have some weakness where the wasp nest, I believe, takes neutral damage from everything. The acid spitter is probably one of the most annoying bugs in the game because it's fairly common. You see them appear fairly often. They can hit you from a very long range. They're actually quite accurate, and they make really no noise when they're moving around. So they can get into a position where they're almost like head glitching you from around a corner and spitting at you. That can be really annoying. They are a light armored enemy, so you can kill them fairly quickly. They have a base health of 120, so it's not too bad to kill them. If you have any weapon that has decent range, you can kill them pretty easily. Even something like the driller's pistol that doesn't have the most damage on it can still kill them fairly reliably at distance. They can do a surprising amount of damage very quickly too, especially if there's multiple of them. I think I'd put the acid spitter probably somewhere at the high end of C tier. It's still fairly weak. You can still kill them pretty quickly, and there's usually not more than 1 or 2 of them at a time, even on higher difficulties. But when you do get like 3 or 4 of them and they all decide to focus you, it can be a really bad day. So I guess I'd put the acid spitter in C tier. Next enemy is the Brood Nexus. The Brood Nexus itself really isn't that big of a threat. It's more of an annoyance because it just keeps spawning the spawns that will run out and then attack you. Now, just having one of those run out and attack you really isn't that big a deal. You can hit it with your pickaxe and kill it, or if you have thorns, you can just completely ignore it and let it die. Once you destroy the Nexus, it throws out a whole bunch of spawns, which, again, for certain weapons isn't that big of a deal because they don't have very much health. They actually have less health than Swarmers, and you can kill them very easily. You can kill them very easy with things like the autocannon or the flamethrower. Overall, I would probably also say the Nexus itself is more like a high D tier annoyance creature. It's not really a huge threat because unless you fall down a hole and there's a couple of them, or you fall down a hole and then somebody pops one, you're probably not in that much danger. You're just going to ignore it until you clear out everything that is a threat, and then you're just going to focus it and kill it real quick. it's going to just be more of a bullet sponge that just eats up ammo. That's really all it's going to be. Alright, up next we have the Bulk Detonator. This will also count for the Golden Detonator too. These guys are really scary when they show up, because they always show up at the worst time. They are a giant tank, more or less, that does have some weak spots with these little dots on them. If you pop those, it will die. If you let this thing get close to you, it will start, well, you'll start seeing embers in the air, and it's about to explode, dealing a lot of damage to everything around it, as well as blowing up the area around it too. It can also dig for you guys in really any direction, which is really scary. It can create just massive holes trying to climb up to you or climb down to you. Really put you in some bad spots sometimes, especially if there's a horde coming. It is terrifying to see a bulk detonator, crawl up over there, or when you're in the middle of fixing something and just see the bulk detonator, climb up over the side of the wall there. That can be really scary. Also, once you kill them, once you destroy the balls on them, they then explode in a really big explosion that sends out pretty much like little, well, not even little, just big mines that explode as well. So you can get your whole team killed extremely easy with a bulk detonator showing up. If you freeze them, though, then they won't be able to explode when they die, which is really good. So if you have a scout running cryo grenades, or if you have a driller running the cryo cannon, it's really nice to have this thing frozen when it dies. If you're fighting the gold version of this, though, when it dies, it will blow up in a very spectacular explosion that will leave gold everywhere. So you can mine all that gold. You can get a lot of money from those. These things also have a really high amount of base health. Their base health is 4,000. So it takes a long time to kill these things with certain weapons. Weapons like the Scout's battle rifle can kill them fairly quickly because you can deal so much damage to the exact target. Same with like the Engineer's Breach Cutter can deal tons of damage to them. So there is some ways to beat them pretty fast, but you always want to stay as far away from them as possible when they decide to die and explode. Bulk detonators are pretty much the top of S tier in my opinion. They are very scary. Alright, up next we have the Dreadnought. This is just the standard Dreadnought. Now when you open up any of the Dreadnought cocoons, you have a 1 in 3 chance of getting either the standard Dreadnought, the Twins, or the Dreadnought Hive. The first Dreadnought, they have actually made him stronger, it feels like, which is nice, because before he really wasn't that much of a threat, honestly. Once you got his pattern down, a lot of classes could cheese him pretty easily. Now, not so much. He's got more attacks, he's still got some of his old attacks, and he's still just as tanky as he was before. Actually, he might be tankier now. So he can do a lot of damage if he gets up right next to you and decides to melee you. He's got long range attacks that he can throw at you. He's got his bugs that he can throw out with his weird cocoon ball thing, whatever the heck it is, that usually try to swarm to you. And he's also got his invulnerability. Once you break his shell, you have so much time to hurt him before he regrows his shell pretty much, and then you have to wait for that invulnerability stage. Otherwise, if you shoot him, you won't be doing any damage. So the Dreadnought can be pretty difficult. There are still certain ways to beat him, though. If you have Scout can easily get behind him and keep hitting him in his weak spot. If you have Driller, throwing up your shield confuses him, and you can hit him in the weak spot pretty easy. Oh, sorry, Gunner, not Driller. Driller doesn't really have a great way of fighting him. I mean, if you can get behind him and hit him with axes, or just keep hitting him in his weak spot, then it's not that bad. Or keep lighting him on fire or freezing him, that works too. Engineer if you can get behind him again, you can do pretty good damage with like your shotgun or breach cutter or anything like that. Breach cutter works both on his front and his back. So there is ways to fight him. However, he is still usually difficult, and he can kill your team pretty easily. If you don't know how to fight the Dreadnought, he's much worse. Once you get the hang of him, he's not as bad, but since he has been changed recently, he's gotten better. And I would still probably put him somewhere towards the low end of S. I would say the base Dreadnought is still probably the easiest out of the Dreadnoughts. Up next is the Twins. The Twins are one of the other forms of Dreadnoughts that you can get, and these ones can arguably be the most annoying, I would say. I've had games where they just continually do their burrow and shield, which is really annoying. They do both have kind of different attack styles. They can both attack you at the same time, which means you're fighting 2 targets. One of them can use Fire Breath, a Rock Wave, and a Slam against your team, which all of those can be pretty devastating if you're close. And then the other one can attack you from afar using an Explosive Barrage and a Fireball fan thing, whatever it is. Throws out a bunch of fireballs and can hit you. If these combine, they can be really bad, especially if you're the only dwarf left. If you're the only dwarf left, fighting these two can be really annoying because one can just pop up right behind you, hit you with pretty much everything as you're focusing on the other one, and that would be the end of your mission. Like I said, they can be really annoying with their burrows too, because you have to kill both these pretty much at the same time. Now that doesn't mean you have to kill, you have to 100 to 0 both of them right away. You can deal so much damage to one, deal so much damage to the other, but if you deal a ton of damage to one and the other one's burrowed, they're likely both going to burrow, and the one that is uninjured is going to heal the other one back up to where it currently is in health. So these can take a lot of time and a lot of resources to kill if they really want to, because they can just pop up one at a time and then just constantly both pop up to heal each other and then keep doing this. That's happened to me a couple times, and they are probably the most annoying Dreadnought in my opinion. I think I'd put them above the Spider Tank actually. I'm not sure if they're as bad as the Detonator, because the Detonator can just kill everybody instantly, whereas these guys probably won't. So you have more of a chance to res teammates, and they don't always tend to both be up at the same time. So I think they're below the Detonator. And then the last Dreadnought we got is the Dreadnought Hive Guard. This one can be a bit annoying as well. He's probably the most normal boss fight, if there was a boss fight in Deep Rock, where he's kind of just got the same sort of stages where you damage him so much he'll throw out his guardians. You have to damage his guardians before you can damage him. Pretty straightforward. He can still be very dangerous, though. He can still kill you very quickly, especially these little guys that he throws out. He is still probably usually harder than the basic Dreadnought, but maybe not as hard as like the Spider Tank. I would probably put him, I think, below the Spider Tank, but above the regular Dreadnought nest here. Still a great bug. Plus he looks arguably the coolest out of the Dreadnoughts. All the Dreadnoughts look pretty cool, though, too. Alright, up next we have the Exploder and the Radioactive Exploder. The only real difference between these is, well, when this one explodes, it does radiation damage afterwards, so it does damaging effect over time. This one can cause the fire effect, so you take fire damage over time. These enemies can be pretty scary, especially if there's a lot of them, and especially if you don't have a very wide open map. Or if they're on magma core, that can be bad too. So the way that exploders work is if you deal so much damage to their body, they will explode, dealing damage to everything around them. That can be actually pretty good for you because you can kill multiple enemies with an exploder. You can stop them from exploding though a couple of ways. If you hit them in the head, and you kill them with a headshot, then they won't explode. And if you freeze them, then they also won't explode. So with the cryo cannon or the cryo grenades, if you freeze them, and even if you shoot up their body, they won't explode, which is really nice. Now, exploders themselves aren't really all that bad to fight at a distance. It's mostly when they swarm you quickly is when it gets really bad. You can die extremely fast to exploders, especially if a lot of them just come up behind you. They usually don't make much noise until they're on top of you and about ready to explode. That still does give you a little bit of time to run away from them, so you'll at least not take the full brunt of their explosion, provided you aren't like stunned or webbed or something like that. I would probably put both the exploders into A tier because of how annoying they are and how big of a threat they can be, where they can just show up and blow you up and kill you. Alright, up next we have the Glyphid Grunt. This is the basic bug that you're going to see in pretty much every mission. They show up everywhere. They're just melee enemies that charge you. They can climb across walls and everything. They're not really that much of a threat by themselves. However, in large groups, they definitely can be threats. So everybody knows the Grunt, and I'm probably going to put the Grunt into C tier. You can kill them fairly easy. They are light armored, so hitting them anywhere does pretty good damage. If you hit them in the head, you do bonus damage. They're also really good for proccing like the perk Vampire, especially if you can freeze them first. Moving on from the Grunt, we have the Grunt Slasher. This is the upgrade to the Grunt, where they have more damage, they have more health, and they're just overall better than the regular Grunt. Still not too difficult to fight. There's usually not tons of them that come at a time, but when there is, it can be pretty annoying. They can deal a decent amount of damage to you. I think I'd put the Slasher actually maybe into B tier. He is a little bit stronger than the base Grunt. Well, maybe not. I think I'll put the Slasher at the top of C tier. Stronger than the Grunt, and potentially more dangerous than the Acid Spitter, where the Acid Spitter is way more annoying than the Slasher. But he could potentially kill you faster if you're not paying attention to him. And then our last variation is the Guard. The Guard is the tankiest of them, having much more health than either the Grunt or the Slasher, and being classified also as a heavy armored unit. So he takes reduced damage from a lot of weapons. Guards are probably the strongest of the... Well, Guards are the strongest of the base enemies, or at least base Grunts. And I'd probably put them... I'm not sure if I put them above Leeches. I'd probably put them maybe on the same level-ish as Leeches. These ones are the best to make Steves out of. If you're running the perk Beastmaster, be sure to try to look for a Grunt Guard rather than a Slasher or a regular Grunt, because you'll get the bonus heavy armor on them. So they'll take less damage unless that armor gets broken, and then in which case it probably doesn't really matter. But yeah, pretty strong units, and can be very annoying, especially if they kind of turtle up and block their face. It can be kind of hard to hit them in the head then. All right, up next we have the Menace. The Menace is, I'm probably going to say, the most annoying bug in this game. It is really annoying to have a Menace just constantly showing up and spitting at you. So they can burrow, and they can hit you with their spit, acid, whatever the heck it is that they spit out at you. They also have a very large amount of health. Their weak spot is on their sides as well as kind of their face. It can be really hard to kill these if your team isn't focus firing them, because they can burrow away and regenerate their health. That's even more annoying if they have the regenerating bugs penalty on, because then they'll just heal faster and they usually pop up more often to spit at you. They can deal a really high amount of damage per second to you very quickly. They're pretty much like an acid spitter that is more tanky and can burrow. So it's not super fun to fight the Menaces. I would probably put the Menace, in terms of lethality, probably into A tier, at the top of A tier. Alright, next we got the Praetorians here. We have the regular Praetorian, the Frost Praetorian, and the radioactive Praetorian. There is slight differences in each of these, but they do all have the same amount of health and the same amount of armor. They are counted as a heavy armored unit. Their weak points are their mouth and their thorax. They're behind. Hit those, and then you can kill them. If they get close, they will start spraying at you. If it's the regular one, they'll spray acid. If it's the radioactive one, they'll also spray acid. And if it's the frost one, they'll spray frost on you. The frost can freeze you in place. These will all do damage over time too, which kind of sucks if you start getting spit on by these. Once they die, they also emit a gas cloud. For the basic one, this cloud is flammable, so if it gets lit on fire, it will cause an explosion. The ice one will deal constant freezing effect on everybody and freeze over time effect on everyone. And the radioactive one will just deal damage from the radiation that leaks out. So each of these, I would say, are about the same in terms of difficulty. It just depends on situation. Where the radioactive one can do the most amount of damage, I would put all of three of the Praetorians probably up into A tier. I think I'd put them above the Exploders. I mean, if I was really ranking them, I guess I'd rank them something like this, with the radioactive one being the most annoying, than the regular one, than the frost one. But that's just my choice. They're all pretty much the same. I'd put them below the Menace. I find the Menace way more annoying than Praetorians. Praetorians are pretty standard and you fight them fairly often. Alright, and then we've got the Oppressor. The Oppressor is very tanky with unbreakable armor on. So you can't just tear apart his armor like you can with even the Praetorians. He's always just as tanky. His weak spot is his back. It's a very small spot. He's got more health than the Praetorians. He's all around just pretty much an upgrade from the Praetorians. He doesn't show up as often though, which is kind of a good thing. He also has damage resistance towards every type of effect besides ice. Ice is his least resistant skill, so you can freeze him and then kill him fairly quickly by shattering him, which is pretty nice. Certain other weapons can kill him fairly quickly too, like the breach cutter, the battle rifle that Scout has, something like the minigun can if you're right up next to him, the revolver can. All of those can kill the Oppressor pretty quickly. He does also have a disruption ability where he starts smashing the ground and knocking everybody away, dealing damage to him, or dealing damage to them. That can be pretty annoying. I would probably put the Oppressor somewhere into low S tier. Still a scary bug to fight a lot of the time. Alright, up next is the Swarmers. Swarmer by themselves aren't really a threat. You can kill them very easily with any class. However, they almost never come just one at a time. They always come at like 30 at a time. And for that, they can actually be pretty scary. They can rip you apart very quickly. Certain weapons, again, like the big AoE weapons, can kill them very easily. Autocannon, flamethrower, cryo cannon, as well as if you're running thorns, they'll die very fast too from hitting you. You can also just kill them with your pickaxe. They're not really that big of a threat on lower difficulties. On higher difficulties, I would say Swarmers actually become scarier, because there is just times where a swarm of them can just come out from behind, a wall or something and munch you to death really quickly. I would still probably put them somewhere into C tier, probably on the same level as the Grunt. It's a similar thought where the Grunts are tankier, they're bigger, they're easier to notice. But in groups, they can be scary. Swarmers can potentially even be scarier, but they're easier to kill, and depending on what weapon you have, they might be super easy to kill. The Warden is really tanky. The Warden has almost as much health as an Oppressor does. They are heavily armored too, which makes them kind of annoying to fight. However, their bulb on top makes it so they take a lot more damage there. They do take more damage on the face as well. And the Warden by themselves are completely harmless. They will not attack you no matter what. So you can literally just walk over to a Warden, climb on top of it, and just beat it to death with your pickaxe, and it won't fight back. However, they do make the other enemies stronger when they're around them. You can tell this by their magic. I'm not sure what to call it. That makes all of the other bugs stronger. So they're more of a class they're more of a bug that buffs all the other bugs rather than be strong by themselves. So I think for that, I'd probably put them somewhere into B tier. It can be pretty annoying if there's a lot of Wardens and they keep showing up and overlapping and just attaching to a bunch of Grunts or Praetorians, where it just takes much longer to kill them, especially if they're hiding behind all of their friends. Then it can be even harder. If they're by themselves, or if they only have 2 or 3 Grunts that are really attached to them, then they're really easy to kill and not much of a threat at all. Web Spinner is up next. Web Spinner is similar to the Acid Spitter. They don't do as much damage as the Acid Spitter, but they do add the status effect of webbing you when they hit you, which can be really deadly if you're in the middle of a swarm or something. These ones, I don't know if I'd necessarily... I'd say if they can web you, it's worse than getting hit with the Acid Spit, because usually you're going to get hit by the Acid Spit once or twice, and get out of the way of it and then kill the thing. If you get hit once or twice by the Web Spitter, that might be the end during a wave. So I think I'd put the Web Spinner actually a little bit higher. I think I'd actually put it into B tier. Above the Acid Spitter, but... yeah, that's kind of strange. I don't know. If there's multiple Acid Spitters, it's worse than if there's multiple Web Spinners, assuming the Web Spinners are all hitting one person. Alright, up next we have the Tyrant Weed. This thing is also a really big tank. You cannot hurt it while it's closed. You have to fight its sprouts, its appendages, and have some resistances. They're not the hardest to kill, but you do have to kill multiple of them for this to open up, and then this also starts sprouting the healing pods. Sometimes it can put the healing pods in really almost unfair positions at times, where it's like you need a driller and a scout to get to them, because sometimes they'll put them, floor up above you where you have to drill up through the ceiling to get to them, and then it will put another one the floor below that, where it's like those two can just constantly heal it. If your team is focusing the Tyrant Weed, it's not that bad of an enemy to fight, really. However, if you have teammates that are unaware of how to fight a Tyrant Weed, which is kind of common in this because they don't show up that often, so not a lot of people are that aware of them, as well as they do have deceptively long range. So if it's a wide open area, these can actually be worse to fight in because they can just keep spawning things, especially if, like I said, there's a ceiling and a floor below them. They can potentially keep spawning their healing pods. I'm not sure where I'd put the Tyrant Weed, actually. I would probably put the Tyrant Weed actually somewhere into S tier, I think, because I've had some pretty hard matches with them in it that they have not made it easier. And that might just have been the team that wasn't focusing it that much. I feel like if my team focuses them, they're not that bad. They're probably like somewhere in A tier. I would say they're more annoying most of the time and potentially more dangerous than an Oppressor is to me a lot of the time. So I'd put it a little bit above that, but below like the Dreadnoughts and the rest of the things up here. All right, up next we have the Mactera Brundle. This one is kind of a weird one. It's a flying tank, more or less. It has strong armor, and it's weak to status effects, but not so weak to actual bullets hitting it. These ones usually aren't too much of a threat. They're more of a threat than the basic Mactera are, but mostly they're kind of just a damage sponge or an element sponge. If you can light them on fire, or especially if you can freeze them, they're not that bad. However, they almost always come in a group of enemies, and that can be pretty scary. I'd probably put the Brundle somewhere into high A or high B tier. Scary bug, actually, at times, but usually it's scary because it's in a group of other Macteras. And let's talk about the rest of the Macteras while we're at it. So we have the Mactera spawn. This one is the standard spawn that shows up. It's got a decent amount of health. Its weak spot is its belly. It has pretty low resistances towards elements and melee damage, so if you can get close and hit them, you can kill them pretty quickly. They don't have any sort of armor or anything, so bullets can deal damage to them pretty well. Long-range guns can do really well against these, especially things like the Scout's Assault Rifle, the minigun, the Battle Rifle, anything like that that has decent range can kill them quite well. At close range, they can spit at you, which is really bad. It can actually do a lot of damage to you, and there's usually a decent amount of them. I'd probably put them into high C tier. And then finally we have the Tri-Jaw. The Tri-Jaw is essentially like 3 of these, but it can target one person and spit 3 shots at it, and it is even tankier. And their weak spot is their belly, the same as the other spawn. The Tri-Jaws can do a lot of damage to you, though. I've died to Tri-Jaws a lot of times. They can do a surprising amount of burst damage, especially in a group, because sometimes it can be hard to focus them when the whole group is attacking you. And I would actually put the Tri-Jaw in A tier, I think. I think the Tri-Jaw is the scariest of the 3 here. And then we have the Goo Bombers and the Ice Goo Bomber. The regular Goo Bomber is more of an annoyance than anything, but it can be a really big annoyance. If it keeps putting down goo and you keep stepping in it, that's really bad. It's also pretty tanky. Certain weapons can kill it. Anything that can do high single target damage, like the revolver or the battle rifle, can kill them fairly quickly. But it can be so annoying for them to just constantly put goo down and hold you in place while other enemies attack you, especially if they're more flying enemies. If it's melee enemies, it's not that bad. I'd probably put Goo Bomber, I guess I'd put him into B tier, the same reason why I'd put Web Spinners in there. It's more the status effect that's really annoying to you than anything else. So yeah, I'd probably put the ice one a little bit higher than it, where it can deal ice damage to you and fire out the ice balls, as well as freeze you over time, which is more annoying, I would say, because getting frozen and not being able to do something for like 10 seconds or so while you have to break out can get you killed pretty easily, whereas the regular goo probably won't kill you as much. So I guess that's why I'd put it a little bit higher than the other one. Grabbers are kind of similar to leeches, as they can just come down, grab you, but they do make a pretty audible noise when they are going to come and grab you, and just when they're in the area. So you're also guaranteed to get let down from them too, unlike leeches, where leeches will just keep hitting you until you're dead. So I don't think they're as scary as leeches. You know, the more I talk about leeches, the less I believe that they should be in B tier. I'm going to boom them up to A tier. Put leeches in A tier. I'll put grabbers in B tier. Because your team can get rid of grabbers faster. There is a chance that the grabber could just grab you, lift you way up into the ceiling, and then just drop you and kill you. but there's also a chance that it might do something like that and you might only fall a little ways and be fairly safe. So grabbers can be more of an inconvenience, whereas leeches can more easily kill you. And speaking of grabbing enemies, let's talk about the Trawler, or the Sand Shark as I call it. These only appear in the Sandblast Caverns. They dig through the ground, but they can grab you the same way grabbers can or leeches can, but these will let you go after some time. They do a little bit of damage when they hit you, and you're unable to do anything while they're grabbing you. Your teammates have to knock the thing off of you, assuming it doesn't die from like status effects like fire or something. These are probably the coolest looking of the grabbing bugs, in my opinion. I do really like these. They're kind of creepy. They're not really all that effective a lot of the time, though. Most of the time they just kind of ignore you, and sometimes you'll get, like, if you're running heightened senses, you'll get that little light up every once in a while. I'd probably put these guys like into C tier. They're not as scary as some of the other grabbers are. All right, next up we got the Breeder. The Breeder is really, really spongy. It's got a lot of health. They are always flying, so they can be in very high up positions where it can be difficult to hit them. They will spawn the eggs, which will drop down. They'll eventually hatch and become the shockers here, or I guess the hatchlings, and then try to swarm out and get you. These aren't really a huge threat, but they are a big annoyance. If you keep letting a breeder just fly around the entire time dropping these, it will end up costing you a lot of resources. You want to take these out as fast as possible, but them as an enemy really aren't that difficult to kill. They're just really spongy. So I'd probably put the breeder... I guess I'd put the breeder in B tier because it does pose a threat, constantly putting little threats down, but them themselves aren't too hard to kill, and they're much more of an annoyance, but it's a continual annoyance. Kind of like the Nexus, but the Nexus isn't going anywhere, and it's only spawning one little guy every once in a while. This is spawning, maybe up to 10 of the little hatchlings that would come out and attack somebody, which is bad if they're, mining for something or trying to get an objective. The Shocker, just like I said, these aren't really a threat. They are kind of annoying. They can zap you and kind of slow you down. It's not really that fun to fight them. They're similar to Swarmers in that way, where it's just a lot of them can be kind of annoying. Swarmers, I would say, are more dangerous, though, whereas these are much more of an annoyance. I would probably put these at the high end of D tier. All right, and then we've got the Qron. I'm not sure how to pronounce this. The Youngling. These are the roly-poly bugs that roll around and slam into you. These are the smaller ones. They are pretty tanky. They do have medium armor. They have an okay amount of health, and they actually have pretty decent damage resistance towards a lot of attacks. They're still not very hard to kill, though, if you hit them in their weak spot, which is their tail or their face once they're opened up, or if you just have an armor-piercing weapon, like if you're using the battle rifle or something like that. You can kill them pretty easily, even through their armor, or like the boomstick can kill them very easy if you're up close. They're not that much of a threat. They're mostly just there to disrupt your team, knock you around and potentially throw somebody out of position to where it's good for the bugs. I would probably put them somewhere in the bottom of C tier. And then we have the Shellback here, which is the improved version of it. It's just stronger. It's more tanky. It has heavy armor then. It can deal damage by spitting out its spit. They can knock multiple people away because they are so much larger, and that can deal a pretty good amount of damage. These guys can actually be kind of a threat on certain maps, but sometimes you'll just see them, running around the map and not attacking anybody, which is pretty nice. Then they're pretty easy targets. I'd probably put them somewhere into about the middle of B tier, somewhere around there, because they can kind of throw you around the map pretty easily. Up next, we got the Spitballer. The Spitballer just sits in place. It can't move anywhere. However, it is a ranged unit, so it can hit you from quite ways away. It is very tanky as well. It can take quite a few hits. Its weak spot is right at its throat, I think. You can also shoot their spit. If they spit a ball at you, you can shoot it and break it so that you can keep hitting the enemy. These by themselves aren't usually that much of a threat. You can usually run around them pretty easily and keep hitting them in the throat area to kill them. They also do a pretty decent amount of splash damage on their hits, so I would probably put them, again, somewhere in the low end of B tier. They're kind of a nuisance, but not super difficult to deal with. And then last up, we got the Stabber Vines, which is another new-ish enemy, I guess. This is a vine that can stab you in the bog. These guys can be pretty bad because there's usually multiple of them. It's usually not just one Stabber Vine trying to hit you. It's 2 or 3 of them. And they can do a pretty good amount of damage to you. They have an okay amount of health, and they're really just annoying because sometimes you won't even notice them. A lot of the bog just looks like the Stabber Vine, so you're not going to be on the lookout for them, and all of a sudden you just get stabbed by a couple of them. I guess they're more of an annoyance than some of these other ones. However, if you do see them, you can just stay away from them, and they can't do anything to you. So I don't know. I guess I'm going to put them in the low end of C tier. They do more damage than these other kind of annoyance enemies. So I guess they're a little bit of a step up from that, but not much. So this is where I'd rank all of the enemies in Deep Rock Galactic. Tell me what your thoughts are, and tell me what your favorite bugs or most dangerous bugs you would say are down below. I would like to do a favorite bugs list too, because a lot of these are really cool looking, and some of them I really do like. We're also going to be including all the passive creatures then, which are some of the best creatures. So if you'd like to see more videos like this one and other tier list videos, as well as more Deep Rock Galactic videos in general, be sure that you're subscribed. That way you get notifications whenever I post any of these videos. And thank you guys so very much for coming here. I really do appreciate it. And I will talk to all of you guys next time. Till then, stay cool and bye.